Hey guys, I want to talk to you about Ethan Klein. Specifically, I want to talk about how he's been putting out a consistent lie that he is a supporter of Palestine. I've been a fan of Ethan Klein since I was 12 years old. I remember the first video I watched was him and Jontron trying Papa John's for the first time, and going from there and watching all of their reaction videos thinking, man, this guy must be the funniest creator on the platform. I even followed him onto the podcast, even when there was video after video being put out about how Ethan's jump from YouTube videos to podcasting was terrible. It's probably not an exaggeration to say that being an H3 podcast fan from 2020 to 2023 was one of the most unpopular things online. Over time though, I noticed some habits Ethan had when talking about politics. When being confronted with political ideologies that he finds extreme, like communism, he demonstrates no curiosity, and it ends up turning into this super defensive meltdown that was really frustrating to watch. He even debated with his former podcast host, Hassan, on this issue, and said his preparation for it was ChatGPT. Now, was he joking? Probably. But the conversation was so embarrassing that it doesn't really matter if he was or not. It really made me think, is he really this uncurious of a person? Does he really not like looking at things from a different perspective? And then, this happened.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The death toll across Israel and Gaza has topped 1,300 as the bloody conflict stretches into its third day. Israel today announced a total blockade on Gaza, including food, water, electricity, and fuel. On Sunday, Israel declared war on Hamas after Hamas fighters launched a surprise, coordinated attack on Israel Saturday.
The weeks after October 7th, I was extremely sympathetic to what Ethan was going through. Being a longtime fan of the show, I knew Ethan was Israeli and had family there, so I could only imagine what they were going through. But as time passed on, and as I involved myself more and more in the movement to stop the subsequent genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza, those habits I noticed earlier started to become really apparent. There were many things Ethan said that just rubbed me the wrong way, and as we will go on, we will see why. Ethan has repeatedly called those who call him a Zionist anti-Semitic, because as he states,
if you call me a Zionist, you're anti-Semite. You know why? Because I'm not a fucking Zionist, and I've made that exactly, profoundly, deeply clear. So when you see someone on Twitter, when you see someone in the audience calling me a Zionist, what they're calling me is a fucking Jew.
But there are a myriad of things that kind of point to a direction that Ethan is in fact a Zionist. But what makes a Zionist? Ethan himself has given the definition that it means you believe that Israel has a right to exist. But this begs the question, exist as what? Would anyone argue that Israel has the right to exist as the Fourth Reich? What about Israel's right to exist as a totalitarian communist dictatorship? No, of course not. Clearly, I'm being facetious here. He obviously means Israel as the Jewish state. And this is the crux of the issue, I think. Israel's foundation as a Jewish state was based on the displacement of hundreds of thousands of people and the continued oppression of the indigenous population, the Palestinians. For them, the idea that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state means Israel has a right to be their occupiers and their oppressors. This reality is something Ethan never confronts. And in this view, which centers Palestinian oppression by Israel, Zionism has been associated with the oppression of Palestinians. In this video, we will see that Ethan is not an ally to the Palestinian cause and should not be treated as one. Also, quick disclaimer, I started making this video before the content nuke on Hassan dropped, and while I've had to rework a lot of things because of the video, I don't want to be pigeonholed into defending Hassan. I believe the arguments I put forward are almost completely independent from Hassan's political commentary and should be treated accordingly. So please try, if you can, to treat my arguments independently from what other people are putting out. This is not a defense of Hassan. Ladies and gentlemen, I present Ethan Klein, Moderate Zionism, Dissected. One claim that Ethan has made repeatedly is that segregation doesn't exist.
By the way, segregation is not real. There's 20% of the population in Israel is Palestinian, full citizens, integrated in all levels of work and life there.
Which is utterly baffling to me. Ethan, who markets himself as a stalwart supporter of Palestine.
I share a lot of those views, and I've been a stalwart supporter of the Palestinian cause for many years.
Denies the very real reality of daily oppression of the Palestinians done by the Israeli government. While it is true that around 20% of Israeli citizens are Palestinian, that doesn't explain much of anything on how they are treated. This would be like if a white American in the 50s said, by the way, Jim Crow in America doesn't exist because black Americans are 10% of the population and can vote. To really understand why Ethan is wrong, let's go over what Amnesty International has said in regards to the system of apartheid that characterizes daily life for Palestinians. According to their 280-page report, Palestinian citizens in Israel are subject to a system that attacks their ability to participate in Israeli democracy. As Amnesty writes, these provisions prevent Palestinian lawmakers from challenging laws that codify Jewish-Israeli domination over the Palestinian minority, unduly limit their freedom of expression, and as a result, impede their ability to represent the concerns of their constituents effectively. They have also been the basis for repeated and persistent attempts to disqualify Palestinian parties and candidates from running in successive legislative elections, although these have generally not been successful. Israeli Palestinians are also subject to an urban planning zoning system that makes it, quote, nearly impossible for Palestinians in many localities in Israel to apply for and obtain building permits. This has led to many Palestinians to go ahead and build homes without permits, which can be demolished any time by the Israeli government. The report also states that almost 36% of Palestinians living in Israel live under the poverty line, and they experience higher rates of poverty and lower levels of labor force participation, educational attainment, and health. These multiple disadvantages are likely to be mutually reinforcing, with, for example, low educational attainment leading to unfavorable labor market outcomes. So yeah, definitely not a situation in which I would describe as
full citizens, integrated in all levels of work and life there.
Oh, and trust me, I'm just scratching the surface. Again, the full report is 280 pages long, and not only that, similar organizations like Human Rights Watch and Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem have reported similar reportings. I should also state that this doesn't even get to those who live in the West Bank and in Gaza, which has been occupied by Israel since 1967, and how the Palestinians there face even worse oppression by the Israeli government, oppression which Israeli settlers that live in the West Bank don't experience. They can vote and are protected by the IDF, all while living on Palestinian land. Why is Ethan, a self-described stalwart supporter of the Palestinian cause, ignoring the fact pro-Palestine activists and advocacy groups have consistently called Israel an apartheid state? Why does he ignore human rights organizations like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and B'Tselem's reporting on the apartheid system in Israel? Does he not know that the International Court of Justice found that Israel's treatment of the Palestinians in the West Bank amounted to racial segregation and apartheid? How does this even make sense? It only makes sense if he is cynically using the idea of being pro-Palestine as a cover to hide his real opinions. Ethan's characterization of the one-state, two-state divide is bizarre, to say the least. He states in the video that
Problem is that Israel's been at war with its neighbors for 70 plus years, and it makes a lot of sense that there be some distrust there.
Ethan goes on to state that it's reasonable that Israelis are fearful of being an ethnic minority due to their history of repeated persecution in the Middle East. He shows a map of the Jewish population in Muslim countries and their decline after the 1948 war as they were expelled and were forced to migrate to what is now Israel.
Just to give you an idea, here's a visual representation of the Jewish refugees after 1948. Morocco had 265,000 Jews. Now it has 2,000. Algeria had 140,000. Now it has about 50. Iraq had 150,000 Jews, now 10. And I want to give a special shout out to my boy over in Afghanistan, one known Jew. We know him, we love him. He's the one Afghan Jew.
They were forced to leave their homes, their lives, their property, and migrate to the only place in the world that would accept them, which was Israel.
What Ethan leaves out, though, is that those Arab countries are not Palestine. Ethan's retelling of events is so one-sided that he doesn't mention that Palestinians are a completely different group that have different interests than Iraqis and Afghans, and should not be held responsible for the horrors those governments committed against Jews. What's even crazier is that Ethan barely even mentioned the Nakba, only saying it once as an aside.
They came from the surrounding Arab countries that expelled them in massive amounts following the 1948 war. In fact, there was more Jews displaced than Palestinians during the Nakba. 1 million Jews.
For those who don't know the Nakba, or the catastrophe in English, during the 1948 war that Ethan mentioned, over 700,000 Palestinians were displaced. Zionist militias like the Irgun and Haganah destroyed over 500 villages and killed 15,000 people in massacres like in Deir Yassin. Those militias would later become the IDF. 70% of Gaza's 2.4 million population are descendants from this. The Nakba would result in 78% of the land being taken by the Zionist militias. That was the foundation of Israel. And that is what a Jewish state means to Palestinians. The reason why I'm harping on this point so much is that Ethan completely neglects this history, and it shows that Ethan's reason for a two-state solution is based on a faulty premise. This isn't the first time he's done this, by the way. Ethan, when talking about the origins of Israeli food and how Arab Jews fled to Israel, he completely avoided talking about the Nakba. I should also add that the great irony of Jewish migration to Palestine was not lost on early Zionist settlers. Theodor Herzl stated in the late 1800s, "Anti-Semites will become our most dependable friends. The anti-Semitic countries are allies." Ethan has repeatedly attacked those who advocate for a one-state solution for not realizing that the one-state solution would cause the genocide of the Jews. His reasoning for this fear was that, as he states in the video,
So if the Jews of Israel are surrounded by Islamic militant terrorist groups that have stated their goal is to annihilate Israel as a Jewish state, and considering the historical context of Jews being pogromed from Arab countries, is it really that crazy for them to not feel safe as an ethnic minority, even a little bit?
Ethan Klein is essentially putting the cart before the horse. He is not placing the actions of terrorist organizations like Hamas in the context of the history of Israeli occupation of Palestine, and it makes it seem like Hamas is this unique organization that is dedicated to murdering Israelis, even though the group was only founded in the late 80s and achieved power in Gaza in 2006. And there have been way more Palestinian resistance movements who have a longer history than Hamas. When you remove a group like Hamas from its historical context as a Palestinian resistance group like the PLO, you are essentially making the violence they commit meaningless, and you will never be able to truly understand the conditions that they are in. Palestinians are not a race of violent people who love Jewish blood. There is a reason for why violence occurs. Disclaimer, I want to make it absolutely clear that this does not justify the actions on October 7th or any other terror attack. Merely, it explains why Ethan's myopic characterization of it is extremely lacking. What's weird though, is that providing this nuance is not controversial when applied to other terrorist organizations. Here is Ethan Klein talking about Al-Qaeda doing 9/11 with Hassan Piker.
How many Iraqis died in that George Bush war?
I'm not sure about the exact number. That's always in contention, but paired up with like Bill Clinton era onward sanctions, like the immediate sanctions were I think 500,000, but I'm not entirely sure. They say to the tune of millions.
That's crazy.
In Iraq.
Yeah, like you don't understand that.
Yeah.
Like millions of people died from that. Of course, they're gonna be pissed off. I mean, what the fuck? That's crazy.
What's more is that Ethan seems to not have even investigated the idea of a one-state solution, or why people even advocate for it.
To look at that situation and say, I think we can like lift the blockade, let everybody in Gaza and the West Bank have free reign to go into Israel and basically just, fully integrated from one day, lights are on, the borders are gone, full integration. It'd be crazy, right? I mean, it would be fucking mad to do that.
As usual, he relies on framing the conversation in this way to make it sound extremely unrealistic, basically by making up straw men. Ethan Klein's vision of a one-state solution is so crazy. Does he really think people advocating for it really want both populations to just smash together and just see what happens? Let's try flipping the script on Ethan here. Hey Ethan, did you know that there are over 700,000 Israeli settlers living in the West Bank in entire communities with families? Where are they supposed to go, huh? What, you think it's a good idea to just kick them back over the border? Also, I want to put here, it is absolutely not a Zionist opinion to subscribe to the ideas of a two-state solution. Political scientist Norman Finkelstein and world-famous intellectual Noam Chomsky advocate for a two-state solution, but their reasoning for it is essentially that the two-state solution is the best avenue for Palestinians to achieve justice under the current legal and political paradigm, and, most importantly, that it can set the conditions in which a one-state solution is possible in the future. What I'm pointing out is Ethan's flawed logic and framing of the conflict, and how his reasoning behind the two-state solution is because of an imagined inevitable genocide of Jews. Again, I have to ask, why does Ethan, a stalwart supporter of the Palestinian cause, completely leave out one of, if not the most defining tragedy of the Palestinian people? Why does he base his belief in a two-state solution on a premise that neglects Palestinian history? And what side's interests does it serve to neglect it?
I am an active duty member of the United States Air Force, and I will no longer be complicit in genocide. I'm about to engage in an extreme act of protest, but compared to what people have been experiencing in Palestine at the hands of their colonizers, it's not extreme at all. This is what our ruling class has decided will be normal.
On February 25th, 2024, 12:58 p.m., 25-year-old active duty Air Force member Aaron Bushnell approached the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C., poured fuel on himself, and lit a match. 2 hours earlier, he posted on Facebook, "Many of us like to ask ourselves, what would I do if I was alive during slavery, or the Jim Crow South, or apartheid? What would I do if my country was committing genocide? The answer is, you are doing it right now." Aaron Bushnell's self-immolation was one of the most powerful acts that anyone did during the genocide of the Palestinians in Gaza. It forced the public to reckon with the brutality of what the state of Israel was unleashing with the assistance of their own government. Aaron Bushnell's sacrifice was felt so deeply that his name is now immortalized as a street in Jericho, which is in the West Bank. A couple days later, on his members-only show titled See You Next Tuesday, Ethan jokes about what happened.
It was absolutely insane how he stood the whole time. That was crazy. I don't even know how that's humanly possible. Again, not to put this uncouth, but he's a champ at fucking burning a lot. I mean, that sounds bad, but he did it really good. Does that bad sound bad?
This is probably one of the most disgusting things I've seen him say in the past year. I don't even know what commentary to give here. It is absolutely absurd how anybody trying to say that they support Palestine would denigrate the act of someone engaging in the most extreme method of protest, especially in protest of the genocide that the country they grew up in was financing and the country they married in was enacting. He then goes on to characterize Aaron Bushnell's act of protest as a suicide.
There's this magical thinking that it's not a suicide. That's just so weird. It's not a suicide until it... We don't believe in suicide, and we're pro-mental health, unless it's for a good cause. Then, then go for it.
Obviously, while it's true he ended his own life, it wasn't some act of self-despair. It was an explicitly political action. I wonder if Ethan would say the same about Buddhists in South Vietnam, or Tibetans in China, or Muhammad Bouazizi, whose self-immolation caused the Arab Spring. What is the point of this argument? Does it even need to be said? I hope if any of the points I make in this video convince you that not only is Ethan a Zionist, but one that cynically uses the cover of being pro-Palestine, quote-unquote, as a get-out-of-jail-free card. It's this one.
Yeah, his last words were "Free Palestine" as his body was engulfed in flames, which is, to me, one of the most stunning things you could, it leaves me speechless, and I guess it just it sickens me to hear so many members of the liberal media just talk about, anyone who sets himself on fire is certainly not mentally well, and maybe even if that's true to a certain degree, what does it say about the mental health of people who can live with the shame and cowardice of just seeing what their country is doing every day and do nothing about it? Or even worse, I'm doing nothing about it, but I'm saying even worse are the people who see it every day and then find a way to pretend like it's something else. And I think that's what the problem is, that they cannot countenance an act of protest such as this or self-sacrifice without, finding a way to, I don't know, to shame the person who did it, because his act shames them.
He is not alone. Remember Aaron Bushnell. Remember Aaron Bushnell. He is not alone. He is not alone. Remember Aaron Bushnell. Remember Aaron Bushnell. He is not alone. He is not alone. Remember Aaron Bushnell. Remember Aaron Bushnell. He is not alone.
A couple of months ago, I saw this video by YouTuber Badempanada titled How to Defend Genocide. In it, he shows how two influencers, Lonerbox and Destiny, were putting out extremely vile propaganda to justify the genocide of Palestinians in Gaza. I remember finishing that video thinking to myself, wow, how could anyone watch these guys and think that they are a good voice for Palestine? Anyone who fell for that has got to be an idiot. Okay, I realize that I'm going to have to relitigate a lot of what Badempanada has said, so before I do so, please go watch both his 2 videos and Disinformation Tracker's video on this topic, which are linked in the description. Badempanada in his video I mentioned earlier shows this clip of Lonerbox watching a debate between Mehdi Hassan and the former Israeli spokesperson Eylon Levy. In the clip, Mehdi Hassan brings up this article by the New York Times titled 65 Doctors, Nurses, and Paramedics, What We Saw in Gaza. The article states that 44 doctors, nurses, and paramedics saw multiple cases of preteen children who had been shot in the head or chest in Gaza. Here's how Lonerbox reacted to the information when Mehdi brings it up.
Said children were brought into hospitals we were in with gunshot to the head, sniper shots. Perfect. Exact targets. There is no tunnel that justifies shooting toddlers in the head. Israeli snipers.
Does this guy not know how sniping jobs work? Like, the problem with sniping isn't, like, the accuracy is not because obviously you got your scope and the fucking, like, yeah, it's quite easy, you can accurately snipe, but targets and personnel move really, really fast when you're sniping. Like, snipers make their decisions in less than a split second in combat situations.
Yep, that's right. He completely downplays the shooting of Palestinians in Gaza, saying Mehdi just doesn't understand how sniping jobs work. But it doesn't just stop there. Hassan Piker later watched Badempanada's video on his stream, which forced Lonerbox to respond. And do you know what his response was? Do you know what he thinks would clear the air?
He's referring to a New York Times article that is based on statements from doctors, nurses, and paramedics who basically went to the press and said that they had seen an unspecified number, I think one doctor said 13 in total, of children who were found with single bullets either in the head or chest. Nothing in this article says anything about them being sniped, which is interesting. The doctors didn't say that these people were sniped. Not least of all did they say that these kids were deliberately picked out and targeted when they were sniped. But that's just an inference that these guys both added and will just believe uncritically.
Not only does he think that's a good response, but it shows that he isn't even aware that the healthcare workers issued a public letter to President Joe Biden, clearly stating every single signatory to this letter saw children in Gaza who suffered violence that must have been deliberately directed at them. Specifically, every one of us who worked in an emergency, intensive care, or surgical setting treated preteen children who were shot in the head or chest on a regular or even a daily basis. It is impossible that such widespread shooting of young children throughout Gaza, sustained over the course of an entire year, is accidental or unknown to the highest Israeli civilian and military authorities. Again, all of this is from both Badempanada and Disinformation Tracker's videos, linked in the description. Now, 2 weeks later after all this happens, Ethan invites him on the show. Now, is it fair to expect Ethan to watch every negative video on the internet about guests he wants to have on? No, of course not. But this leaves us with 2 very uncomfortable explanations for Ethan. Is it watched Lonerbox's commentary and thinks this is good?
Does this guy not know how sniping jobs work?
Or 2, he hasn't watched his content at all, meaning this statement.
When I hear you talk about like Israel, Palestine, or Ukraine, I feel like you have like a really deep understanding of things.
Was a complete lie. I'll leave that for you to decide. Oh, real quick, I forgot to add, Ethan Klein, when talking about Israel's actions in Gaza, he makes sure to specifically name Netanyahu.
They're led by Netanyahu, who should resign in disgrace and go to prison.
Well, here's Lonerbox sitting in the back of a car with Eylon Levy, the former spokesperson for the Israeli government, which was led by Netanyahu. What the fuck are we doing here, guys? Ethan and Ela Klein did a post-election episode after Donald Trump was elected president for the second time, just the day before. At the beginning of the stream, I shit you not, Ethan and Ela try to at least partially lay the blame on Muslims for Trump getting elected.
Well, wait till you see the data, because women voted for Trump, Latinos voted for Trump,
Muslims
the Jews,
voted
by
for
the
Trump.
way, the Muslims voted for Trump.
What?
The Jews, however, stood with the Democrats.
This alone would merit a response, but it's immediately eclipsed by the following statement.
The other day, Bibi fired a really good guy that a lot of people are pissed about, and he fired him because they had a disagreement, and that's like so Trump coded.
Well, he was like a moderating voice in the war room.
Yeah.
The really good guy who is being referenced here is former Israeli defense minister Yoav Gallant. Yoav Gallant is literally one of the people responsible for the horrors being unleashed on Gazans. This is like saying Yang Sari, one of the people who helped Pol Pot commit genocide in Cambodia, is a good guy, or as Ethan puts it, a moderating voice. To give you an idea on just how bad this moderating voice is, let's just look at what the International Criminal Court wanted to charge him with. There is 1. Starvation of civilians as a method of warfare, as a war crime.
A really good guy.
2. Willfully causing great suffering or a serious injury to body or health or cruel treatment as a war crime.
A really good guy.
3. Willful killing or murder as a war crime.
A really good guy.
4. Intentionally directing attacks against a civilian population as a war crime.
A moderating voice.
5. Extermination and or murder, including in the context of deaths caused by starvation as a crime against humanity.
A moderating voice.
6. Persecution as a crime against humanity.
A moderating voice.
7. Other inhumane acts as a crime against humanity. Yoav Gallant is also famous for saying the following before the Israeli siege on the Gaza Strip. I have ordered a complete siege on the Gaza Strip. There will be no electricity, no food, no fuel, everything is closed. We are fighting human animals and we act accordingly. Ethan expectedly got a lot of backlash for this statement and tried to clear the air in a video titled Hassan Piker is a Liar. In it, he says that in regards to the quote I said earlier,
now a lot of people look at this language and think that it's dehumanizing and genocidal, and I'm one of those people. I agree that this is a horrible thing to say, and I don't defend him, and I never would defend him, a statement like this, which I assume people who watch this show know and understand.
This is a complete lie. Just hours before he uploaded the video, he posted this on his Instagram stories, trying to defend this statement. As he writes, this quote is from October 8th and is a direct response to the October 7 terror attacks. I think it's a reasonable assumption that he was talking about Hamas militants that killed civilians just the day before. This is such a stupid justification, by the way. 1. I don't understand how you can say he was talking about Hamas when he's talking about shutting off electricity, fuel, and food in the same statement. Is there a specific aid truck that goes to Hamas headquarters or something that we don't know about? And 2, we know he was talking about civilians because of the genocide that happened for an entire year after he said that. Like, what the fuck are we talking about? That statement, by the way, is being used by South Africa in the ICJ case as evidence of Israel's intent to commit genocide. He then tries to assert the idea that Yoav Gallant was a moderating voice in the war room and wanted to end the war.
We're talking about the fact that he's the only person that wants to end the war, and I personally don't understand how that's not relevant.
Okay, fine. Let's assume that's true. Who cares? Let's say hypothetically that Adolf Eichmann, the man who designed the concentration camps in Germany, changed his mind and he said he wanted to stop the Holocaust. Would Ethan then say, well, he was a moderating voice in the government? Like, yeah, sure, relatively he would be, but he is still a monster and no ally to anyone who was trying to stop the Holocaust. Stalwart supporter of the Palestinian cause, Ethan Klein, either had no idea who Yoav Gallant was, or he intentionally was trying to whitewash his horrific culpability in killing at least 61,709 people at the time of writing this. Okay. This is going to be a chapter of bad takes that Ethan has said over the past year that doesn't necessarily fit within the rest of the video. So if you want, you can skip to the conclusion at this time code. 1. From the river to the sea. One of the biggest rifts Ethan and Hassan had that contributed to the downfall of their podcast was when they debated the slogan from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Ethan has repeatedly said that the slogan was anti-Semitic and was a call for the genocide of the Jews. This is a ridiculous statement on its face. If you believe a slogan which Palestinians have been using for decades that explicitly calls for freedom is a genocidal statement, then that says more about how pro-Palestine you are than anything. 2. Che Guevara. Okay, this one is just hilarious.
He wasn't Cuban himself.
Yeah, Che, the revolutionary, he once executed a 12-year-old for being too anti-revolutionary. Shot him in the face, bro.
Why did you bring that up?
I just want to remind people. I just need to remind people because everybody's in the mood to simp for these psychotic fucking authoritarians that, yeah, Castro shoots kids in the face. Just saying. Or no, Che.
This is literally not true. Ethan is repeating an unsourced lie he saw on Twitter. In fact, John Lee Anderson, the man who wrote one of the most well-researched biographies on Che Guevara and actually helped find his remains in Bolivia, says this: I must point out that while Che did indeed execute people, an episode I have gone into at length in my book, I have yet to find a single credible source pointing to a case where Che executed an innocent. So no, as far as we know, Che Guevara did not shoot a fucking 12-year-old for being counter-revolutionary. Okay, in this video, we have seen Ethan spewing Zionist talking points denying the apartheid system.
By the way, segregation is not real. There's 20% of the population in Israel is Palestinian, full citizens, integrated in all levels of work and life there.
Said the one-state solution can happen because Palestinians would genocide Jews.
And once the Palestinians outnumber the Jews, basically anything is fair game for the Jews. Anything.
Laughed at and dismissed Aaron Bushnell.
Like, he's a champ at fucking burning a lot. I mean, that sounds bad, but he did it really good. Does that sound bad?
Invited a streamer on his show who straight up denies crimes against Palestinians.
Does this guy not know how sniping jobs work?
And called the man who enacted the genocide against the Palestinians a moderating voice in the government.
Or he was like a moderating voice in the war room.
Yeah.
I hope fans of the show realize that when people call him a Zionist, this is why. How the fuck is he a supporter of Palestinians in any way? Seriously, he and his fan base constantly point to things like him donating $6,000 to a Palestinian charity, or when he cried after seeing footage of Palestinians suffering in Gaza. That does not and should not excuse him for saying and doing things that legitimize the violence that he's crying over. So no, Ethan is not an ally to the Palestinian people, and we need to stop pretending he is. Hey guys, just putting this message here that I'm putting a donation link to the PCRF in the description. So if you have anything to give, please click the link in the description and donate to them. Thank you.